Hi there. Today, David and I are joined by Managing Director Natasha Bleicher and Associate Ty Haberland from Stirling Rose in Western Australia, which is an incorporated legal practice that specialises in digital law. Thanks for joining us, guys. Would you like to provide us with a little bit of background into you both?
Sure can. Okay, so some of the partners at Stirling Rose, I suppose you could say, come from big law. So we've had probably between us a few decades of working in large institutions or large global legal practices, helping people to work with emerging technologies from smart legal contracts to quantum computing to artificial intelligence, right at the pointy edge of the law over many, many countries. So Stirling Rose has come out of that milieu, and we continue to do that all over Australia, and we also give commercial advice and consultancy services globally, because as you can imagine, most tech companies, most startups and most institutional consortiums who are engaged in emerging tech don't tend to just stick to Australia. Maybe they should, but they don't tend to. So that's what we do. We can predominantly corporate legal advisory, but really where there is, let's put it this way, where you need legal special forces and there isn't really often established law, that's where we tend to play.
Yeah, I'm an associate here at Stirling Rose. Always been very passionate. I have a small background in computer science and marketing, and just really embracing all things AI at the moment.
Great.
Thank you. And I understand that you guys have a AI implementation project of your own that you're attempting to implement AI tools in your practice. Is that correct?
100%, but it's not even. I think the interesting thing about AI is it's really a horizontal, it's not a vertical per se. So we like to think of it more as an AI wash. And it's also not something we just started. It's something that we've been using AI tools in the business, and certainly our AI practice lead head, Shelley Jane Price, she's been using GPT-4 for years. So it's not something we've just sort of implemented in the last few weeks, if you will. So when I say it's a horizontal, it's not just that we're using the large language models in respect of ChatGPT, for example. It's that when we do our marketing, we might use images that are AI generated. And also, going forward, we'll be increasing our use of large language models, both in the way that we assist clients by using those tools, so in direct product delivery, and also internally to assist with our business service functions to automate increasing amounts of work and to make sure that we can use, I suppose, AI to do the low-level grunt work to free us up to play at the edges.
Yeah. So that was, last time Ty and Sarah had a talk about the impact that this would have for somebody at Sarah's end of her career, sort of, junior lawyers, and what sort of skills do you need to play in this new space. So I was really interested in this time engaging with where the opportunities are for the firms themselves, where you see the immediate low-hanging fruit in terms of things that you can implement reasonably quickly, and where you think the medium-term advantages are for firms that need to start to think about using these kinds of tools in their own practice.
Well, I think the first answer is that there is no law firm who can ignore AI tools. If you are ignoring them, you're probably at risk. This is a Kodak moment. When it comes to what large language models do, or generative AI, it is what we do. We as lawyers, I've seen some statistics that say that 25% of lawyers will be replaced by large language models. I've seen others that talk about sort of high exposures in administrative and legal professions up to 44%. I think that's your Goldman Sachs report. What we do is we process language, and we look across large corpus or corpi of data or corpora of data, from whether it be from parliamentary websites, whether it be from court judgments, and also our own institutional knowledge. So what we see is that you should expect in any law firm that is going to have a number of changes. Let's say there's 3 primary changes. One is that the staff that you do have, you're going to look for slightly different staff. So when it comes to a junior lawyer like Ty, he's of a particular interest to us at a firm like Stirling Rose because he's cross-modality. So he can help us to implement our AI tools in a really practical way at the same time as he's doing traditional legal advisory. That's a very useful junior candidate. The second thing is that junior candidates generally, I would predict it will be a tighter market, because we can see that when we use large language models in the firm, that low-level tasks, which are particularly a regurgitation of the law, in some ways you could use a large language model to do those things better. Rightly or wrongly, you can do that. So the market, I would say, is getting tighter. So this all sounds very gloom and doom. It's not.
Well, it's certainly an issue of great concerns to the universities, because, I mean, already, getting people from that formal training into job ready, there's already a fair bottleneck there, and many firms find it challenging to really pay for that transitional training that young people need when they're starting a legal career. So you think that that's going to contract even further, and then this jump from university into the workforce, a lot of that's going to be the work that is paying for those people to be there now will become automated. You don't see any real way around that.
And I don't think universities have worked out how to approach that yet. And, fair play to them. It's a very difficult problem. And to be honest, this is not about lawyers. This is not just about law firms. This is not just about law schools at universities and graduates. This is quite a step change in the way that humanity processes intelligence and the jobs that we need to do as a society. It's a paradigm shift. People have used those words about a lot of things. This is a paradigm shift. So if it is that we can basically take the things that we've done, and this is not just junior lawyers, this is senior lawyers. If I can just make the third point, which is that you're looking at productivity increases by senior lawyers as well. And you're looking at productivity increases in a way where quite A-OK senior practitioners perform far better, and okay or great practitioners still improve, but less improvement. So people are starting to work at how smart does it make you if you can use this as a hybrid tool. So it's not seeing it as in just the machines versus the lawyers or the algorithms versus the lawyers. It's more this hybrid is how can you use that tool to be better? So to segue that back into your point is that if you're a law school, it made sense maybe to have a bit of a reaction to ban something like a large language model or students using them. I have a student at university. I'm pretty confident all the students are using the tools behind the scenes, even if it's not admitted. But the better thing perhaps to do is to work on those traits or work on those skills. We as humanity, we as lawyers, we need to work out what is it that our clients can actually do for us, what we can do that's not the part that the machine can do. And we've kind of done these things in the past before. We don't need as many horses. We don't need as many people to make horseshoes. That's just a fact. And the fact is, in the future, a lot of the white collar professions, including lawyers, will not need to be people who can just spit out large lots of memory around particular cases and how they apply or particular laws.
And I think adding to that is that kind of common misconception that I think a lot of people where that AI can actually understand the law. It's simply identifying patterns and making predictions based on its training data. And I guess that really comes back to that augmenting versus replacing point, because at the end of the day, the actual understanding of the law will still need to be done by a human at this point until we really truly reach some AGI future world. It seems that a lot of people, the whole concept of replacing rather than augmenting is really dominating the kind of discussion at the moment. And I mean, in the immediate short term and for the foreseeable future, a little bit along the way, it's simply going to augment the practice, which gives an opportunity to humans as much as it, the doom and gloom.
So at the moment, the large language models haven't really been turned loose on the specialist expert data that the law firms hold. So once you've got the expert systems that are trained up in that, something like a large language model will be very useful for, a farrier lawyer like me who's been doing horseshoes for all of their career, to be able to talk to this expert system and get it to do what it wants to do. I've got no interest in Python coding. I tried it last week and it didn't end well. So, what sort of skills does somebody like me who's sort of, midway but not quite ready to pack in the tools yet, What do I need to do so that I can thrive in this new environment rather than just sit there grumbling about the good old days?
You can use the consumer product of, particularly within your organisation, if you've got a good AI policy, which I would suggest everybody has, to make sure that people are playing within the guardrails of ensuring that proprietary information or confidential information is not, exiting the building in an inappropriate way. But you can use the consumer tools like GPT-4, Pro Mode, GPT 3.5, which is not as good. You could use those things even as a very simplistic user to augment your capability as a practitioner. I think if there's anyone who hasn't done that yet, they're not trying. Yeah. Then the next step, of course, is what you're talking about bringing systems inside. And we've seen some announcements from large law firms, some of the large Big Four, where they've actually spent lots and lots of money on being able to bring systems inside. And what that's effectively doing is taking a large language model and doing, there's a number of possibilities of what people are doing. Is they're effectively bringing the model in and creating a conduit and effectively training that model to their internal data sets. There is another way which doesn't involve you needing to create your own large language model, which is fine-tuning an existing large language model. So, and that actually, to be fair, is something that's a bit more democratic, because the amount of content, talking about your corpora of data that you need to train or fine-tune, the cost of doing so is based on tokens, is based on volume-based pricing. So theoretically, a smaller firm would have a smaller cost base because their corpora of data is smaller that they need to train, rather than a really large firm. We've done some very rough hack calculations on tokens and fine-tuning and use of, for example, I don't want everyone to think that the only large language model is OpenAI's language models, but let's use them for an example. You could be at a big firm, you could be in the millions of dollars to basically be augmenting your own large language models internally. A smaller firm could, at the starting point, you could spend $10,000 to be able to start getting the benefits internally of fine-tuning a model. If we could get too technical too quickly, but fine-tuning is still not a holistic answer for a small model, but it's places that you can start to feel like you're on the journey of making sure that your firm is doing a better job of producing your product in the most efficient way that meets your legal duties.
Yeah. So in terms of what that looks like in terms of output, so I would take all my firm data and would turn it over presumably to a specialist who's going to tidy that up, work out which appropriate tool is going to give me an outcome, turn it loose, and then I would be in a position where I could say, James needs a lease. It's got all of the history of the leases for James's business going back 15 years, and it will be able to produce that reasonably quickly. And that's what I get for my $10,000, or am I going to have to buy somebody else's library and then work with their precedent base?
Yeah, so you're seeing some open source ones come out at the moment, like the Llama models, which all these general AI models at the moment are using something called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that's basically where you are supervising it, or someone is supervising it and saying good answer, bad answer, to actually, denote which is good quality data and should be, favored over the others, depending on how you're engaging in it with a, standard chatbot interface like that. So in terms of being able to train it yourself, there are kind of guides out there, which is relatively a bit above basic Python and stuff like that, libraries to be able to actually feed your own data into it. But I mean, again, with the way things are going at the moment, it wouldn't surprise me if that starts to get quite democratized soon, and you're going to be able to, someone out there will create some kind of, upload contracts, upload, precedents, and be able to spit that out relatively seamlessly.
And just to be clear, it's a virtuous circle of genius improvement. And what I mean by that is that at the moment, most law firms will have an IT department. Okay, an IT department is usually just keeping the lights on and dealing with backlog. And also most law firms, and I've certainly been exposed to this, have boffins, legal boffins, who are a little bit techno interested. And the truth is, if you take an IT department, they should be able to ream through more of their tasks, because the same way as I'm saying to you about productivity improvements in lawyers using these tools, the exact same benefits are sitting there for efficiency for IT or computer scientists, because there are already, there's the Copilot product sitting in GitHub for computer scientists to be able to, I mean, you can basically put an instruction saying, how do I do this? So you're saying, how would I do this? And I'm saying there are tools there if you're a computer scientist, there are tools there if you're just a boffin lawyer who wants to know how I do it. You can basically have this best friend who stands next to you and tells you, how do you do it?
Even in my own experience, David, you saying problems with Python before, I have been, my coding expertise myself in the last 4 weeks has gone up exponentially by just plain text, asking it as I'm going along, helping out with our own website and things like that, and just going like, hey, struggling a little bit with this, copy and paste the code that I have half a crack in, and it spits it out for me. And then I say, help me explain to me why you did this line by line. And it's been absolutely unbelievable.
So it's almost that expertise has become more penetrable by our average humans.
Yes. So presumably this comes at a cost, in the sense that if I take all my firm data and I drop it into a nice, helpfully supplied API, that training data, that is going to be used to train not just my system, but a competitor as well. So there is always going to be that double-edged sword. If I'm not paying somebody to do it and somebody's doing it for me, they must be getting something out of it. And I'm assuming that my data is the product if it's not immediately apparent how it's all been paid for.
So there's lots of different methodologies, and I would suggest for us as law firms, we should not be using the surveil to pay methodology. So there are ways that, look, to be honest, even if I give you this answer now, it's a moving feast. It could be in 2 weeks from now, it's different. When we talked about this 3 weeks ago, it was maybe 3.5 weeks ago, it was something where even we used ChatGPT, it would collect all the data and all your prompting. Whereas now you can go into your settings and turn that off, so it doesn't collect your data. So there are methodologies, and increasingly with proprietary products, you can look at OpenAI tools. I mean, OpenAI, remember, is partnered with Microsoft. Microsoft has been providing enterprise-grade infrastructure and tools for a very long time, and they have got a very good idea of what enterprise needs to keep things behind the wall of privacy. So those systems and API calls, that very, very good idea to read your terms and conditions. And maybe not for us small players, but for very large businesses, they certainly have the ability to create bespoke terms and conditions that are basically in ICT contracts that allow them to make sure that that's not happening.
And as we go forward, I think you'll see large businesses in general will begin to actually store the AI themselves on. That's what you can do with the Llama models, the 7 million parameter model, for instance, that you can store that in a relatively decent server in your own kind of business, on your own Wi-Fi, not connected to anything else. The whole bot is actually going to be running off your own system. So when you're training it data on top of those initial 7 million parameters, for instance, you're not feeding it out to anyone else.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about that for a second. So the large language models, some of them, I mean, they're saying OpenAI, no one knows, but maybe has 1 trillion parameters. What Ty's talking about, which is the Meta product, which is the Llama large language model, is actually open source. You're talking about 13 million or 60 million. And then it also is getting results which are just as good. So my very distasteful joke is sometimes size doesn't matter with a large language model. So anyway, the point is that there's lots of different ways to do it. The holy grail is to actually get your large language model onto your phone, because if you can get it onto your phone, and there's lots of chat about why Siri, for example, is Siri going to be capable of being your best, we call ChatGPT chatty. Should Siri be your next, paperclip friend in your phone? But apparently the back end of what Apple's products don't actually have that large language model capability to date.
Yep. Okay, so takeaway for a small firm is read the T's and C's and be very aware of what data trade-off you're making. Don't sit there dazed and confused, because you don't have to spend $100,000 or $1 million on this giant bespoke product. There will be reasonably friendly small business alternatives in the near future. And so it's a matter of being flexible and thinking through how our business works and thinking about how you could perhaps automate a bit of that and save some money and improve productivity. Is that the sort of the takeaway you think that a 3-4 partner firm should be taking away?
I think that's really good. But I don't. There's just so much you can do, and everybody should be playing. If being very careful about your proprietary information, there is a lot you can do already, no matter how small the size of the firm.
Yeah. Do you have any points, Liv?
Also integrating an AI policy just for firms, if staff incorporate it, just making sure that those parameters are measured for other staff members. But otherwise, what are some of the potential challenges that firms might face when incorporating these systems? And how would you overcome these as a small firm or a mid-size? Anyone facing these?
I think one major one that I've seen from firms generally, an actual challenge on a more human level will actually be the training. Technology is notoriously, I know that there are many businesses out there in Australia, particularly law firms, that still run dictaphones to their secretaries, and it's very old school, and you have fax machines still whirring. It's getting smaller firms that are quite resistant to change, where they'll get left behind. And I guess the only combatant to that is very good, in-house consulting, training, upskilling, actually familiarity with the software itself, not just kind of turning a blind eye to it and going, I'll get my juniors to kind of run this part. It will require an actual uplift of the technological infrastructure behind a firm.
For me, the answer probably, as the rubber hits the road, is the psychology of lawyers in their product and a propensity to default to the very authoritative voice of a large language model. And as we know, it isn't an actual expert voice. It's more like predictive text. So if somebody in your law firm doesn't have great confidence, they may actually use the large language model's answer and think it's better than their own answer. So it's easy for people to start handing over chunks of content that has been generated without doing the work of engaging with the content themselves, because it looks really good and it sounds really good. So there's a psychology element where we have to use the product, but also still not be not be unaware about the hallucination problem, which is that things will be said with great authority that could be completely bonkers. And an example of that is one of my friends was looking for a text on a particular area, and the large language model manufactured a text which sounded wonderful, but it didn't exist. So be very careful. We always, within Stirling Rose, we triple check everything. It's always good to give it a first whirl with the product, but you have to keep a human in the loop, and you have to go back to multiple other sources and check, is that true? Not dissimilar to what people would have done with Wikipedia in the past. You don't stop at Wikipedia or you've got a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got, I guess the takeaway there is don't be scared of it. Look at your computer infrastructure to make sure that it can adapt quickly when the opportunity arises. Where would you think would be the best place to get the training? Do you just grab the product and, being careful about client confidentiality and that the fever dream hallucination problem, you give it a go and just start using it? Is that the best approach, do you think? Or, is there formal training out there that you think people should be pursuing instead?
I think in terms of where the products are at the moment, the kind of best way, and this is something that I say to everyone, is that just like, it's very easy with something like commercially driven like ChatGPT, where you can ask it to do a basic poem and stuff like that. But as you get deeper and deeper, and I see this even with using some of our AI artwork systems like DALL-E and Midjourney and things like that, is that the prompting behind the input can be so fine-tuned, it's ridiculous, to the point where your output is then exponentially better. So for right now, even in terms of getting a level of familiarity with the tools and things like that, there are some great ones where you plug in, I need you to rewrite this paragraph for me, do it in PhD style analytical voice with substantial revisement, pre-assumed knowledge, and you do that compared to just saying rewrite this to make it sound smarter. The difference between those two outputs, for instance, is just massive, and actually way more. on the nose of what you're probably looking for. So getting very kind of, yeah, as I always say, prompt engineering is an odd term that's being thrown around a lot, and I think there are better words for that. But being familiar with how to actually utilize the tools to their maximum output is really important.
Look, there's probably consultants out there who are right now coming to law firms near you trying to help you do this. But a bit of it is like house style as well. There's a bit of it is going to be how do you want to use these tools? And prompting is a skill, and lawyers of the future will need to be really good prompters.
Yep. But then I guess we've faced that challenge before. If you've got an experienced PA, you can be racing out to court and say, find that thing that was next to the other bloody thing and hold the fort. And wherever you've got a new grad, you have to be a lot more selective. You say, this is what we're trying to do. This is where you find 3 precedents. This is what we expect you to do in terms of the output. And here's a cost estimate. So you've got the skills there, probably. It's just a matter of dusting them off and putting them in the new environment. Is that a fair point, do you think?
It does raise a good point, and that is that something like ChatGPT, particularly if you turn your settings off, it doesn't remember. So it may remember it looks like it remembers, because sometimes, when you're having a chat with it, you can see it's incorporating your previous comments into your current answer. I don't know if you've seen that. But what it's actually doing is rereading. So it's looking at the whole corpus of data, but it's also rereading your prompts in that corpus of data. So one of the things about having a really useful either internal large language model or fine-tuning an existing LLM with your own APIs is getting that methodology whereby you're basically feeding the beast. So you're increasing the quality of your information. And using your example, the secretary remembers what you've asked her to do, so you can shorthand what you're asking to do next time. That's institutional learning. So what we need is for these tools, when they're internal, to be set in a way that the institutional learning is remembered.
And it'll get really interesting in a little while when Microsoft releases its Copilot, which is going to be its kind of, Bing-esque, ChatGPT-esque integrated into the Microsoft system, because there are rumors you kind of read around the fact that it'll have the ability to kind of read your Outlook emails and get your voice actually across and stuff like that. So it goes suggested reply and have a bulk of text that'll be kind of picked up on all your little nuances and quirks that you usually send an email. So this may end up becoming something that's kind of given to you on a silver platter quite soon.
What would you like to get across to small legal practitioners, I think?
I would like to make an ethical point.
Yeah.
That would be really good, your ethics in practice centre. I think that we've spoken a lot about practice and efficiencies and onboarding the tools, or how you would use the tools. But I think the really powerful point that needs to be made to us as a profession and to us as an industry is that nobody really knows what they're doing with these tools. And you have up to 5% of experts, high experts, thinking that on the risk register of life, this is sitting in the code red of the right-hand corner of exponential risk, or existential risk, I should have said. So that for us is really important for lawyers, because the other thing that they're all saying, and this is like Jan LeQuinn, this is your Sam Altman, is they're saying, either we need to be regulated, please regulate us now, put some brakes on us, or tell us how we should put guardrails around this. Or B, in the case of Jan LeQuinn, who is from Meta, their chief AI scientist, he's saying, oh, don't worry about it. There's no existential threat, because there'll be good laws and rules that work out how these models or their next iteration should work. So we should all be hearing as a profession either alarm bells there, or alternatively putting our shoulder behind the wheel to work out how to regulate AI, particularly generative AI, as it approaches AGI, because no one really has that sorted. No country on earth, even in the EU, they've got some hard law coming up. No one's done a good job of that. Most people don't even have real law. They just have soft frameworks, rightly or wrongly.
Yes. And frankly, if you think that a regulatory environment's going to be able to move fast enough to address this, then you must be a technologist, not a lawyer, because we all know that that's 3 to 5 years just for a national framework, let alone for an international one. So I certainly take that point. I mean, if we're expected as a profession to be at the forefront of these discussions, we need to get our head around just exactly what's at stake and where the best practice lies. And I think I'd encourage people to read the Australian Ethical AI framework on the, I think it's Department of Innovation website. It's quite a sensible one. And, even if you don't see this as part of your general legal practice, I mean, we are a part of a profession that will have a voice in this. And I think it's important that we use that.
So Natasha, how do you see the role of AI in the legal profession evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think that the timeframes are really interesting. You know how they always say we overestimate what will happen in 2 years, but we underestimate what will happen in 7 years. I think that I'm probably always on the less conservative edge of timeframes. I think we will not recognise how the law is practiced in 10 years. And I think it will embed the use of things like smart legal contracts. It will embed the use of programmable connections and API calls into legislation. I think we're going to see a lot more assetization of the law and contracts. And all of those things mean we also need to, from an ethical perspective, engage with what is our approach as an industry and as a profession to the digitisation of the law. And if you look at something like the fact that in the analogue space, we held it true that it was a public good that we should, for example, invest in public courthouses and make sure they had, for example, access for wheelchairs. These were public goods. Then we as a profession also need to do the same thing and say, if the law is going to be exacted through digital mechanisms in the future, what are the public good elements to digital infrastructure, smart legal contracts, the law, programmable law, that are things we hold dear and true, which are above and beyond process improvement, above and beyond return on investment, and above and beyond money, effectively. Okay, guys.
All right. Well, thank you.
Very happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much.